Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. Tarek and I got a fun and exciting random episode of MiSTer FPGA for you this Monday, because over the weekend and previous into last week, Robert or FPGAZumSpass released a very rudimentary and early test core for Nintendo 64 on MiSTer FPGA. A lot of you guys have been asking me about it, and I did want to test it out and check it out. Caveat, this is not going to be playing games right now, and it's not going to be playing games anytime soon, but this is a fun test to see what's going on currently. Before I get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But stuff like this you're seeing right now, Goemon running on the Nintendo 64, is in no way, shape, or form what this core is currently doing. I'm just using this as footage to show you what Nintendo 64 should look like. But what Robert has done over the weekend, releasing different test cores, is he now has certain demos that he also showed for his PlayStation core back when it was in development in 2021 and 2022, running on the Nintendo 64 core. And I spoke with Robert about the progress, and he's about 50% done with the implementation of the CPU, about 10% done with the RDP chip, and everything else has not been started whatsoever. It is at a 0% work rate. But the CPU, obviously being the linchpin of the system, it is executing code, and you can see that here, and it is showing some patterns on the screen. And Robert also tweeted out about the instruction cache for the Nintendo 64 CPU and getting all of the parameters dialed in on that. You'll see here this little crawl was going very slow, but as he was testing it, now you see it's running at a much more natural speed. And I understand these are not the most visually interesting things ever to show on a Nintendo 64 core, but this is the day one stuff. You need to learn to walk before you run. This is the baby steps that gets MiSTer towards potentially having a Nintendo 64 implementation. Not exactly sure what this demo is, talking about the holidays, but you get these little tiny snowflakes coming down that collect at the bottom of the screen. But what this is showing is it is running instructions off the CPU, it is showing graphics on screen. Now while the Nintendo 64 doesn't have the most silicon ever, it is a pretty well designed board, at least as far as how many chips it uses, compared to something like the Hyper Neo Geo 64, which use the same CPU. That does not mean it's an easy implementation, and he is starting on the CPU side because that would make the most sense, trying to get those quote-unquote hello world screens up on MiSTer to make sure that your initial implementation is working. And that is what we're looking at here. But I'm curious who's excited for this core. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you're a Nintendo 64 fan and what game you plan on playing first, when and if this is actually working. And Robert was discussing kind of the trajectory of this thing, and he's saying, you know, maybe one game playable by Christmas is his goal. That's how much work he's planning on putting into this, and that's how much time it does take. But you'll see here the N64 system test from Lemmy, and this is basically checking different aspects of certain chips on the Nintendo 64. It is passing all 398 tests. It failed 0 out of 398. These are different write parameters, different implementations of the CPU, addition, subtraction things, writing to memory addresses, a lot of things that I probably don't even understand, but you'll see there the heap range, it's kind of a hexadecimal code. This is just testing how it is working, and you'll see here on the Nintendo 64 system test GitHub page, it will show you the status of everything that it does test. You'll see there different accesses and different bit lengths for the RAM, ROM, and the PIF chip, as well as memory, different registers, things that basically make the rudimentary bits of a system that end up playing games in the end. This is kind of the building blocks of how a console works. And the great part is Robert is very open with the testing on this. When he was doing the PlayStation 1 core, there were constant new core builds going on all the time. People were contributing findings and results, and he does like to work in that open manner, which I 100% love. It is fun to kind of test alongside with him. And when I started testing the PlayStation 1 core, it was very similar. Running a few demos in this instance, Symphony of the Night had no dialogue audio. It had some glitches here and there, obviously still further along than Nintendo 64 at this trajectory, but it is fun to see all of this happen in real time, see the improvements. And something like Crash Bandicoot, even running on MiSTer in the first place back in 2021, was just so amazing. And things like Tekken here, when he first started doing that core, they weren't running at full speed, but he got it there. Obviously the Nintendo 64 is much different than the PlayStation 1, but Robert has proven he has the chops to get something like this done. And some other homebrew demos are kind of trying to work a little bit, thanks to NDD for this test right here. You're going to see that when it loads in, it does display something, but then it immediately freezes. But you can kind of see a skeleton in the bottom left-hand corner, and this is what this homebrew demo should look like if it's running on real Nintendo 64 hardware. or via software emulation that does work now, you can see that he's getting close already. That corrupted image that shows on the current Nintendo 64 core is recognizable as something like this, except obviously highly corrupted. And while I understand this is not the most exciting thing to watch, I do love talking about these early stage things. But tell me down below if you enjoy these sort of tests, because I know that most people want to see games being played on the Nintendo 64 core, but there has been a lot of interest, a lot of questions in my way and on Twitter as to how this is shaping up, so I hope you guys do enjoy it. But you can see there, bottom left hand corner, that skeleton is appearing when you try to load this ROM up. The code doesn't really do much whatsoever, but you do get a picture, and at this stage that is pretty awesome. And there's so many other homebrew tests that people have been playing around with, and most of them don't do anything whatsoever. You're going to see E2, which is kind of an error signaling that something is not working. We saw that in the PlayStation 1 core when it was in development as well. Some things basically just black screen, some give you a little bit of pixelation at the top showing that they're attempting to show something, like right there, and other things here like this Zool demo is going to show you that it has some corruption on the screen, but it is at least trying to show you something, and that is impressive even if it doesn't look like much whatsoever. And Andy D decided to try to load up Yoshi's Story just for fun. We are in no way, shape, or form at that stage right now, but at some point in time we may be playing Yoshi's Story on the MiSTer. It's a decent game, not the best thing in the world, but you know what I mean. And you'll see here, trying to go through some of these other demos that Robert has shown on his Twitter, it says Hello World, and that is something that all core developers, all system developers always want to do first. Just get to something to print on the screen. There's different tests going on here. It's showing different things on the screen, and that is where the core is currently at. If you just go into the CPU folder, and a lot of these are on GitHub, I will leave a link to the description below if you want to play around with them, you will see that you get just different images. It's showing a picture, the core is executing code, even with the CPU basically only 50% implemented. But you do need to remember, when you're dealing with CPU instruction sets, not every single thing uses 100% of the CPU's different features. But the most impressive thing to me, at least, is how quickly Robert iterates on these cores. This was from Saturday, a test he published, and you can see that this 3D demo, compared to when I showed it to you earlier in the video, is definitely having some issues. There's a lot of breakup on the graphics, and things just don't look like I showed you. And he was talking to me on Saturday, because I want to do a video, but I wanted to make sure that, you know, he didn't have an improvement in the pipeline, and he said I should wait until he did a redo of the core for the test, because all of this graphical corruption here, it still looks impressive just to get this to run on a MiSTer, because Nintendo 64 was always considered an impossible core. But of course, within like 12 hours, Robert had something completely new and different to show people, because you will see here he fixed the stray pixels. Everything should be correct now, and when we do take a look at this here, you're going to see that it is rock solid stable. Everything is where it needs to be. The visuals are exactly as you would expect. Everything is running at whatever speed it should be. It's really hard to say what is going on in this test. It is just kind of a fly through of a pseudo 3D environment, but it looks impressive. It is running, and it was fixed up in 18 hours at the top end, and I can't wait to see what the next iteration of the core does, because I do hope at some point in time we're just playing Nintendo 64 games on the MiSTer, because while I do love my Nintendo 64 collection and hardware, even with an HDMI mod on it, I do still think that it's one of the weakest systems as far as getting a clean image out of, but I think out of MiSTer it might be just a little bit better. But leave me a comment down below and tell me if you're excited about the core, what game you want to play first, and if you enjoy these sort of testing videos where I'm not showing you gameplay, but I'm talking more about the technical implementations of the hardware and how these first steps work, because for me this is as exciting, if not more so, than actually testing games, because I do love seeing the first steps in making something like this run. But Nintendo 64 on MiSTer is making progress, and I will update you guys when there's more to see. For that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.